Normally a balm to my soul, the fresh mountain air felt like a smothering veil as I looked at my wife's pictures. Med and telephone, each one is a meticulously constructed falsehood. She had been so eager about the solo hike, calling it that exact term, which is now a hard pill I had to take. A weekend trip to the Cascades just to get my mind straightened out, and she purred and kissed me goodbye with a practiced affection that now felt like a brand on my skin. For weeks, there had been a subtle change in her demeanor, a distracted look in her eyes, and the way she would pull away from my touch at night. I tried to be understanding and supportive of her dependent husband, but deep down, a cold dread had been growing, a persistent whisper that would not be quieted. The pictures were unquestionably breathtaking, with towering pines framing jagged peaks that scraped the sky and sunlight dappled through the canopy. Brightly illuminating wildflowers, she was beautiful in each shot, her face flushed with exertion, a genuine-looking smile lighting her eyes. It was a picture-perfect solo adventure, except it wasn't. One particular photo caught my attention. She was perched on a rocky outcrop, the vast valley stretching out behind her like a rumpled green carpet in the foreground. Tucked away in the lower right corner, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it, was a glint of something metallic. It was a watch, not just any watch, it was the distinctive oversized silver timepiece that I had bought for my best friend Eddie for his 30th birthday. Wave of nausea washed over me. The world seemed to tilt. The mountain air no longer refreshing but thick and cloying. Eddie, my best friend, the man I'd shared countless beers with, confided my deepest fears and vulnerabilities to, who'd stood by my at our wedding. The sheer betrayal was like a punch to the gut. The realization was crushing, a tidal wave of anger, hurt and disbelief. My hands were trembling as I scrolled back through the photos. My eyes, now that I was looking closely, I noticed more. A faintly discernible corner of a well-known blue backpack that Eddie always used for his own hikes, a pair of hiking boots that were somewhat darker than hers and partially visible in one picture. The puzzle pieces, which had been dispersed and appeared innocent at first, were now creating a hideous portrait of deceit. My blood froze. The happy front she put on suddenly seemed like a nasty joke. I didn't explode yet. I wanted time to analyze, think clearly, and come up with a strategy. The love, kisses, promises, and well-crafted lies that I had placed in her were all crushed into dust. They had underestimated me, and I wasn't going to let them get away with this. Madison was the epitome of radiant health when she came back that evening. Her eyes were bright, her cheeks flushed, and she gushed, throwing her arms around me. I needed that so badly that I made myself give her a hug in return, knowing it was all a lie and wanting to scream to let out the rage that was building inside of me, but I stayed as composed as ice. "I'm so happy you enjoyed yourself, honey." I spent the remainder of the evening carefully preparing my moves, since I knew I had to catch them in the act to make sure there was no space for denial. I even excused myself and responded in a dangerous manner, claiming to have work to catch up on. The following few days were a terrible dance of pretense while I placed a little hidden camera in the living room, focused on the couch where they always sat when he visited. I wanted concrete proof, so I had to see it all for myself. I played the part of the unaware spouse, smiling and nodding while seething with the wrath that threatened to consume me, and Madison continued as if nothing had occurred, her interactions with me a bizarre blend of normalcy and detachment. Then came Madison had said she was going out with her friends on Friday night, which I knew was a pretext for a rendezvous with Eddie. After a short while, I noticed the front door open and Eddie entered, smiling as though he owned the place. They shared a slow, passionate kiss that made my stomach turn. And then I burst through the door, the hidden camera still recording their stunned expressions. Shock crackled in the air. Madison's eyes were wide with terror and her face was completely colorless. A pitiful excuse for a man. Eddie stood there like a deer in headlights. "What the hell is this?" I yelled, my voice resonating through the suddenly quiet room. Madison stammered, her lies already falling apart. "Honey, it's not what it looks like." "Really, Madison, then what is it?" I spat. "Is it a casual meet-up between friends while I'm out of the house, a secret lover's rendezvous behind my back? Who do you think you're fooling?" I turned my attention to Eddie, my best friend. That rated the betrayal cut deeper than any anger. You spineless piece of garbage. You dare call yourself my friend? You were in my house eating at my table, sharing drinks from my fridge, all while sleeping with my wife. The utter disrespect. I was shaking, my body trembling with a mixture of fury and disgust. He started to stammer, his face a mask of fear. "Look, I can't explain." I didn't want to hear it. I lunged at him, my fist connecting with his jaw with a sickening thud. He stumbled back, his eyes wide with terror. Madison screamed, her hands flying to her mouth. I didn't stop. I rained punches on him, fueled by rage that had been building for weeks. I hit him until he was cowering on the floor, blood trickling from his nose and mouth. I wanted to keep hitting him to make him feel every ounce of pain and humiliation he'd inflicted on me, but I stopped breathing heavily. He struggled to his feet, his face twisted in agony, and fled with his tail between his legs as my knuckles throbbed. I roared and my voice was tight with wrath. "Get the hell out of my house and never return." Madison was sobbing uncontrollably on the couch. I stood over her, my heart hard and cold, and I said, in an emotionless voice, "I want you gone." She cried, pleaded, and promised to change, but it was all empty words, and her trust was betrayed. I watched indifferently as she packed her suitcase, her tears a pitiful attempt to win sympathy, and she turned around one last time, her eyes filled with regret and fear, but it was too late. The bond was severed, and all that remained was the harsh reality of their actions. The days that followed were a blur as I filed for divorce, called our mutual friends, and shared the recordings with them, exposing the affair for the betrayal. I made sure everyone knew what they'd done, and I took a sick pleasure in seeing their meticulously built worlds fall apart. It wasn't enough to ease the pain and emptiness that had set in deep within me, but it was the satisfaction of seeing justice served, knowing that they were paying the price for their lies and deceit. I watched Eddie lose his job and be shunned by everyone who knew him. I watched Madison's social circle shrink as her friends abandoned her. The betrayal had been so complete and egregious that it was obvious they would never recover. Although I was aware that the road ahead would be lengthy, I also knew that I would recover, go on, and never again allow someone to treat me with such indifference. Although it was a difficult lesson, I did learn that trust is valuable and that it is nearly impossible to rebuild once it is lost.